I am Joe Comerford. I represent the Hampshire Franklin Worcester district with hundreds of farms. That and my partnership with Rep. Blais makes farming one of the most important things that my team and I focus on, farming and farmers, I should say. And this bill gets right at the intersection of something I think is so important, which is farming, sustainable farming, and equity. We are so very, very lucky to have Norris from the Food System Collaborative, who will lead us today in this. But let me just say a striking two statistics for you, just to bring us all into the room. So BIPOC farmers are stewarding just 0.3% of farmland and selling 0.4% of the market value of agricultural goods in the Commonwealth. And that, of course, in comparison to the fact that there are more than a quarter of our fellow residents of the Commonwealth who would identify as Black, Indigenous people of color. And so that disparity is so striking and so wrong on every level when we think about the next generation of farmers and sustainable agriculture and racial justice and equity across all sectors, especially in the food security farming sector, which is so integral to our way of life. So again, I feel very, very grateful to have filed this bill, which would essentially establish a commission on agricultural equity. And again, we'll go into greater depth with Norris's leadership, and and thank you, Norris, for also introducing the intrepid farmers who are with us. And I'm so excited to learn from you all. And I'm just going to pass it now to Rep. Blais, and then we'll kick off.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And I'm so happy to partner with you on this legislation. And I just want to start by thanking everyone for being here today. In February of 2020, I attended a conference that was sponsored by American Farmland Trust, where Naima Penniman of Soulfire Farm gave a really powerful presentation that stuck with me all of this time. She explored the roots of food inequality and the historic racist policies that early settlers employed to remove people from the land. That presentation prompted me to read Farming While Black, written by her sister, Leah Penniman, who I strongly recommend reading this book, Farming While Black. It taught me, that research taught me that organic farming was an African indigenous system that was revived in the United States by a Black farmer, Dr. George Washington Carver of Tuskegee University in the early 1900s. I learned that Dr. Booker T. Watley, another Tuskegee professor, was one of the inventors of community-supported agriculture, our CSAs, something we cherish here in Massachusetts. And yet, those numbers, those statistics that Senator Comerford just talked about are prevalent not only here in Massachusetts, but across New England. According to the 2017 Census of Agriculture, most non-white farmers in New England are beginning farmers versus less than a third of white farmers are new and beginning farmers. While we've seen a 50% increase in the number of non-white farmers, they control only 2% of the farmland in New England. Again, this is not a Massachusetts problem. This is a New England problem. It's a national issue that we need to address. So as we're talking about sustainable agriculture, we have to center BIPOC contributions and begin to address these numbers. And this legislation is just a start. So I want to thank you for being here today and to be a part of, and thank you for being a part of this important and very necessary work. And now it is my honor to turn it over to Norris, who will take it from here. Norris, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rep. Blais and Senator Comerford, for that spot-on introduction. You're quite right, and that makes me really eager to begin this work. You all in this network. So, hello to the many offices of lawmakers present today on the call. I'd like to thank again Reps. Blais and Senator Comerford for setting this up, for filing and championing the bill. My name is Norris Guscott. I am the Mass Food System Collaborative's new Equity Policy Networks Manager, and I'm here to give you an overview of the issues at hand regarding agriculture inequity, what it looks like, how it plays out in vulnerable BIPOC communities, and how H860 intends to address those issues. So inequity in agriculture is an issue that impacts BIPOC communities across the Commonwealth with a ripple effect. BIPOC farmers, farm 2% of the land in the state, as Reps Blais and Senator Comerford were saying. Think of all the missed jobs in absent local produce and economic activity. There are limited land access programs and agriculture training initiatives for BIPOC farmers. BIPOC communities suffer food-related diseases at 2 to 3 times the normal rate, and fresh, culturally relevant produce still struggles to find their way into BIPOC communities. And on top of this, there's very limited data at the intersection of agriculture access and the larger mass food system, especially data related to social determinants of health. So in other words, we're making decisions using outdated methods and models. Now, taking a step back, folks might be asking themselves, okay, but what does inequity in agriculture look like playing out across communities in Massachusetts, specifically BIPOC communities? Well, defining systemic inequity, it's a system of advantage created by institutions within an economy, and this takes forms in, many different ways. It can be based on various social indicators, gender, sexuality. But in the context of agriculture and the food system, we see issues with access and it taking various forms and wreaking havoc. Access tends to echo themes of other negative social determinants of health. For example, if we look at the access income inequity intersection, this might look like a BIPOC farmer not having the capital, the savings, the credit to recover their lost crops from a devastating hurricane. And I think Maria Morera at World Farmers could speak to that, actually. It also might look like a family opting to purchase processed, unhealthy food because it's cheaper and closer to their proximity versus purchasing fresh produce, which is often further and more expensive. So in regards to agriculture, inequity in its rawest form might look like, imagine, if you will, a young BIPOC farmer who is struggling to find out about the new programs, grants, communication, resources, et cetera, from MDAR to help her farm. Heck, for many in the BIPOC community, just learning to farm in the first place can be pretty challenging. One might say, well, other farmers were able to access those resources, but our farmer here, she is first generation Black woman who comes from a non-farming family. She doesn't know the ins and outs of our various agencies or their resources. She also has a slight mistrust of government given historical policies that have negatively impacted BIPOC farming, like there's properties. And she also doesn't make enough from her farm profits to afford fast internet. So she's relying on 4 or 5G from cell service to connect. She comes from a neighborhood where this choice was looked down instead of obtaining a more mainstream and secure profession, which further limits her ability to grow her network. And she has very few places she can turn to for resources and help. And I hope I'm painting a vivid picture here, because these are some of the hidden fissures in BIPOC farming here. So enter our bill, S502 H860. It is the foil to inequity in agriculture and begins to address root issues previously discussed. Now, I know everyone might be thinking, great, another commission, but H860 doesn't just create another commission. It represents an opportunity for MDAR to stake build with the BIPOC farmers and communities and address issues in an equitable, collaborative manner, which is important on many levels for trust with those communities. The commission will comprise BIPOC leaders from across the state who are very well seasoned and have been engaged in this work for decades. The commission is going to be able to hit the ground running for immediate impact, and will be able to dive into policy recommendation that's supporting racially equitable investments, resource and program accessibility, recommendations of equity pertaining to existing laws and regs. MDAR and the state as a whole have been great partners historically, and the intention would be to build on that work and data collection, but we'll expand on data in just a little bit. So H60 does all of the above as a no-cost bill, by the way. So going back to data, given my 10 plus years in this space of agriculture, food, and policy, I can safely say there is some limited data available. We were talking about earlier, especially related to equity initiatives. And this is problematic, as mentioned earlier, because BIPOC farmers, the agencies, lawmakers, organizations that support them are making decisions with outdated data. I was on the Mass Food Policy Council call the other day, and they were stressing a need for data. There are next to no social determinants of health data, and when dealing with BIPOC communities, you need to know the sorts of data that are actually measuring what it needs to measure. HX 860 pays very close attention to this issue. The commission, who it's comprised of, and will recommend strategies for data collection, benchmark development, and targeted outreach. Overall, we believe this bill contains language that will begin to address the very root areas of inequity in agriculture in our state and build on the work MDAR has already done in the space. We can't have a thriving Massachusetts if a critical piece of our state's food system still has some elements of inequity in it. We can, we must, and I know we will do better. And again, I'd like to thank Rep. Blais and Senator Comerford for filing and championing the bill, reps and staff from the various offices for listening today, members of the network group. So thank you, and I sincerely hope we see more co-sponsors on our bill and that you all take this back to your respective offices and discuss. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me further with any questions. Again, thank you all. And with that, I would like to move in quickly because I know that I'd like to respect everyone's time. As mentioned before, I did bring members of the working group in the network. They are amazing, and I would like to introduce them now. That would be Pat Spence of UFI. That's Ludia Modi of the Food Project. That's Vivien Morris of the Mattapan Food and Fitness Alliance. And that is John Wang of the Food Project. And so I'm going to ask Pat if she can be willing to kick us off and let us know how's it going.
Well, our farmers, I have to say, are tremendous assets to our community, and they bring all of their experience over decades, along with our elders that help us in growing food. But our mission at the Urban Farming Institute is to develop and promote urban farming to engage our residents in growing food and building a healthier community. We're doing what we couldn't find someone else doing a long time ago. Our goal is our motto is we don't just grow food, we grow people. Urban farmers build community and long-term relationships with the growing of healthy food. The farms become a place to gather for children, teens, and families, and opportunities for neighbors to actively participate in their own health. UFI has 5 farms, grew over 15,000 pounds of food last year, 100 varieties of vegetables, and specialty crops important to us, such as callaloo and Trinidadian pimento peppers, for example. We have an active farm stand and 88 CSA shares. We do education, robust set of programs to teach folks how to grow. And we also work in partnership with the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources to do our biannual urban farming conference. The crux of what we do, though, resides in our farmer training programs for adults and teens in our community. We provide for economic opportunity as we train the next crop of farmers. In 9 years, we've graduated over 230 urban farmers coming from the communities of Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. So what are our challenges? Availability of land and funding to turn vacant land into productive farm sites, which is why UFI established, for example, the Boston Farms Community Land Trust in order to create a pipeline of urban farms to be held in perpetuity for our farmers. UFI, along with many other thought leaders in Boston, pushed for Article 89, passed in December of 2013, to allow for commercial urban farming. UFI developed the first urban farm at a cost, though, of $260,000. Hence the challenge. How do I obtain the land? How do I write the proposals for the funding? How do I obtain the water and sewer connection? How do I work with the utilities? How do I work with inspectional services, wherever we might be in Massachusetts? How do I obtain capital? And MDAR has been a godsend in that area. Absolutely. Where do I go for help? How do I learn best practices for soil remediation, for pest management? There are so many barriers like these that our farmers are up against. We just don't have access to the funding and just the critical resources. UFI is creating scenarios of success, but 860 and 502 will bring more understanding and focus to the barriers we are presented with. Our farmer training program was designed with our community in mind, giving opportunities for those who never thought they could farm in this city, and for those who are from Jamaica, from Barbados, from Haiti, Dominica, Puerto Rico, with farming in their roots and the knowledge of how to grow food that they grew in their homelands. They're looking for the ability to do that same thing here. As my grandparents, my family's from Jamaica, we're in that category as well. The Dorchester Food Co-op, community supported agriculture's produce is supplied by UFI and Oasis on Baloo Farm, run by UFI's 2015 graduate Apollo Catala. Apollo attended our program, went on to manage our farmers market, now manages the most beautiful on Oasis Baloo Farm, 10 minutes from us, one of the most beautiful farm sites in Boston. Chris Mabels graduated in 2014, was in his 30s, he had been incarcerated, unemployed, he had no plan. When he finished, he said if it were not for the Urban Farmer Training Program, he had no idea what he'd be doing. He went on to work with the Commonwealth Kitchen, for example. And Christy now works was in her early 20s, now works for the Allendale Farm. She was able to even bring in, I believe, a brother to work there as well. She's been there for 3 years. Our vision in conclusion is to have thriving urban farms, empowering individuals and communities to access to healthier food, a deeper connection to land and environment, and strong social networks. We need a place in government that will focus on the barriers to the critical role our urban farmers of color play in building healthier communities in a sustainable and equitable fashion. Some say to me sometimes, isn't it just nice what you're doing in your community? And I look and I say, what we're doing is not cute. It's not cute. Our farmers are up at the crack of dawn growing food for the community where the supply chain is broken, and for us was broken long before COVID. So help us break down those barriers for success and empowerment for our farmers. We support 860 and 502, and thank you so much for the time this morning. And thank all of you for your hard work.
Thank you so much, Pat Spence. You definitely brought us and gave us a look at what it is UFI is doing, what the issues are for BIPOC farmers. And again, thank you for giving us that insight. So moving on next, we are still in the farming realm. This time we go to Ludia Modi, who is the North Shore Regional Manager of the Food Project in the North Shore. So Ludia, please, if you would come in here.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm so happy to be here. Like Norris said, my name is Ludia, and I work at the Food Project as the North Shore Regional Director. The Food Project, to share a little bit of backstory, is a nationally recognized nonprofit organization that works within the intersections of youth, food, and community. So we bring diverse youth and adults together to create a more just and equitable food system. So the North Shore, where I reside, has a wide array of culturally diverse people who all have food and farming in common. I was born and raised in Freetown, Sierra Leone, and come from a long line of farmers, agriculturists. When coming to the States about 22 years ago and being a first generation, farming was a way for me to feel connected to my ancestors, culture, and a way for me to have traditional meals. For instance, my favorite meal, a dish that's often cooked every Sunday when I was home, is West African dish called cassava leaf. So this meal is absolutely delicious, and it involves making different meats and eating with rice. And the main ingredient of that meal, as you can notice, is potato leaves, right? For the first year of being in the States, we struggled to find that ingredient, and I felt like a part of me was missing. My connection to home was temporarily gone for that year, and unfortunately, this is a feeling that a lot of BIPOC folks experience when culturally relevant food is not accessible. Part of our work at the Food Project tries to address experiences that I and many others have. When we're thinking about gardens in particular, we work with community gardeners and municipalities to incorporate community gardens and farms and community gathering spaces, senior centers and schools. Benefits of community gardens and farms are that it helps reduce the impact of food deserts in lower income communities, right? Allowing residents to have access to culturally relevant and nutritious food that's necessary for a healthy living. And most importantly, it allows for a creation of social ties to build a greater feeling of community and connection. The majority of the community gardens and gardeners and farms identify as BIPOC, and the use of the garden is a way to continue to connect to culture and feel like they are still home, even though you're long far away from that. Some of the challenges are development displacement that's currently occurring all around in predominantly lower income communities of color, causing a housing crisis and a lack of growing spaces, more disconnection. When we're thinking about markets, we work with local BIPOC businesses to sell local culturally relevant produce, selling food at our mobile markets and farmers market. Lynn Central Square Farmers Market is currently one of the highest federal and state benefits transactional programs market are all around. So when we're thinking about the success of that market, it is due to having culturally relevant food, bringing BIPOC farmers together to sell produce and to invest in the community. We are continuously sharing information about HIP and SNAP benefits to local residents across the North Shore and are expanding existing food access points for low-income residents and elderly residents in Lynn through our mobile markets. The Fruit Project and many organizations and individuals that do this work need more continuous support. There is a need for increased and ongoing funding, not just for established organizations like the Food Project, but others as well. So really thinking about sharing the information about successes, challenges, and data to help inform and improve upcoming and existing projects that make our food system more just and equitable, to make sure that BIPOC farmers don't feel that disconnect. I believe that an act promoting equity in agriculture can give the support needed around these particular areas. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me this morning.
Thank you, Ludia, for giving us that viewpoint. Really appreciate it. Thank you and well done. So quickly moving on and respecting everyone's time, we have Vivien Morris from Mattapan Food and Fitness Alliance. Vivien, please take us away.
Good morning, everyone. I want to also start off by giving a shout out of thanks to Norris and also to Representative Blais and Senator Comerford. So as a Boston resident, as a dietitian, as chairperson of the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, and a member of the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative, I fully support the Act supporting equity in agriculture. 15 years ago, residents of the Mattapan community formed the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition in order to address issues of health and equity and limited access to healthy foods and opportunities for active living. The Mattapan community has very high rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and many other health conditions that could be positively impacted by healthier diets. We believe important keys to healthier diets are more local sources of agriculture and more members of the Black, Indigenous, and people of color community entering farming. Our community of Mattapan has only one grocery store, but we have many fast food businesses selling largely unhealthy food. One of our first projects as MFFC was to create the Mattapan Square Farmers Market as a way to bring healthy, locally grown food to our community and promote increased consumption of health-promoting fruits and vegetables. This we began 15 years ago, but we faced several challenges. First, there were very few farmers willing to commit to selling in our low-income and largely people of color community. We reached out to all farmers and found that there were very few farmers of color anywhere in the state. But fortunately, we connected with local urban farms and World Farmers, which supports immigrant farmers. Through these interactions, we've seen both the commitment of farmers of color to serve low-income communities, as well as their many challenges. We've also seen the value of them producing and selling culturally connected food items that encourage people to eat that healthier diet of more fruits and vegetables. These farmers typically have very limited access to land, they have very limited staff, and they have very low financial resources. They're often located far from major cities and have difficulties transporting their produce to farmers markets. There are still many eligible Massachusetts residents of color who are not connected to the positive resources of SNAP and HIP. These residents would benefit from utilizing SNAP and HIP at farmers markets. Difficulties like climatic changes can be detrimental to small farmers, and those changes impact our community as well. For these and many, many other reasons, we encourage the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to deepen its understanding of agricultural inequities and make the changes needed to address them. Thank you so very much.
And thank you so very much, Vivien. Thank you for giving us that clinical point of view. And I just want to say I've been calling it the Mattapan Food and Fitness Alliance this whole time. It is the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition. I actually work with a Lynn Food and Fitness Alliance, so I mixed up the two. Thanks again, Vivien. And quickly moving on, last but certainly not least, we have the Deputy Director of the Food Project, John Wang. Let's take it away.
Yeah, many thanks for your time, and so much gratitude for Norris, Pat, Ludia, and Vivien for their stories. And so when Norris shared is like, my name is John Wang, Deputy Director at the Food Project. So I support a lot of the work centering around youth, food, and community at our organization, and that we are doing in the greater Boston and North Shore areas. I've been doing this work for, luckily, for over the past 16 years. So just wanting to share, some insights around our youth work and resident voice that contribute to this bill that we're trying to support. So in terms of young folks, over time in the work with young people at the Food Project, we're able to hire and bring dozens of youth each year together on the land we work on. So young folks are able to develop a deep connection and relationship to the land while they're with us over time. And even being away from a significant amount of time, we've seen in a recent alumni study that we're connecting how important that connection to land and their experiences of farming continues to be for them, like many years later, like after they leave. So however, current youth and alumni believe that farming is still not a viable economic option for them, even though there's much interest and much love for it. So as they end their time at the Food Project, very few, if any, of our youth, and mostly white, continue on the path to becoming farmers. Leah Penniman being one of the few BIPOC alumni that continues that work in her various realms. As we're experiencing a lack of representation in the farming community, particularly from BIPOC communities, I think we need to work towards putting together more resources and supports, changing the structure and narrative and making farming easier and more viable economically for BIPOC communities so there can be more representation in this part of the food system. So in terms of young folks, that's some of the observations that we've had. In terms of resident voice, like also in our work in the communities we're in, we've partnered like very intentionally with local residents to help inform and help reimagine what a better food system could look like for their communities. So in centering and building stronger relationships with BIPOC residents in the Lynn and Dudley Groves initiatives that we're currently operating, we're able to hear directly from the collective wisdom and vision that is already present around us, and to try to remove obstacles and leverage the resources we have to lift up and work towards that vision that they have imagined. And together we're having pretty good success with that guidance as we increase access via more market sites. We're testing more win-win distribution models. We're inviting more people into this work, and there appears to be more avenues for farmers to intersect in particular in this work. So in the Dudley neighborhood in particular, as Pat shared earlier, there is a big interest in opportunities to farm and to increase and make those pathways easier to navigate. So that has been a huge thing. And I think having a space to be heard is extremely important. And if we can center more resident voices in this work, not just at the municipal level in which we're operating, but statewide, like from various communities, I believe, a vision only imagined comes closer to becoming more real. So I believe that an act in promoting equity in agriculture could support us in these areas of work to be able to gather information and resources that could be utilized and shared throughout the state, hopefully creating more alignment and ability to leverage our resources collectively to build a better food system that can work for everyone. So thank you for your time, and also all the work that you all are doing in your various fields.
Thank you for that, John, and giving us your 16 years of experience. And before I let Winton wrap it up here, I just wanted to thank my speakers of the network again: Pat Spence, Ludia Modi, Vivien Morris, and John Wang. Again, you all were amazing, and you really gave an insight into what is happening on the ground. And that being said, and quickly moving on, Winton, if you could lead us out.
Thanks, Norris. I'm Winton Pitcoff. I work with Norris at the Mass Food System Collaborative. I want to add something about this bill. A lot of the folks who you just heard from were at the table in writing this bill, and you've heard all the reasons why it's necessary. And I want to point out that what they drafted was not some massive policy change. It wasn't a big ask for money. It was simply an ask for a seat at the table, to sit down and bring BIPOC farmers to the table to talk with MDAR and other state officials to determine what's really needed and what's really possible. And so I'm really excited about this bill, and I really appreciate Senator Comerford and Rep. Blais sponsoring it, and many of you who are on the call co-sponsoring it. If you haven't yet, there's still time to do so. And my main role now is to facilitate questions and answers. So if anyone's got questions for any of our speakers, please either just jump in, use the chat, raise your hand.
Could I add something, Winton?
Please, Pat.
I also wanted to add, for those listening, the folks that you've heard from today also know that we have been working together for a very long time. A very strong group of people. And when we couldn't find the necessary, whatever it might be in the world of farming or providing healthy food for our community, we relied on each other. For example, UFI now has a beautiful state-of-the-art greenhouse, but where were we doing everything prior to that? At the food project. One of my son's first jobs, he's now 25, was at Mattapan Food and Fitness. So my point is, we've been helping, holding hands and helping each other, hanging on, trying to provide the things that our community needs. So there is a strong network of folks currently doing this work, and we hopefully can continue to do it with your help as well.
Thanks for that, Pat. Questions, comments? A final word from our sponsors?
I actually was just going to gush a little. Winton, you, Natalie, and I are texting about what an awesome group of speakers. And Norris, thank you. And speakers, thank you for your unbelievable presentations. This is one of the most soulful, informative briefings I've ever been to for a bill I love. So it happens to be a double good thing. But thank you. It feels like you opened up a bill that I already loved into a new level of imperative with your wisdom and guidance and call to action. I'm deeply grateful to you for your leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for supporting us all along and you championing this. We really appreciate it.
I just want to echo Senator Comerford's thanks. This work is so important. And partnering with you to advance this legislation is meaningful work for us as legislators, and certainly for us as a Commonwealth. And so I just want to thank you for all of your efforts to pull this together from the very beginning. Thank you.